All right, so it's Venn Biblia development update here. This week I'm working on texturing the terrain, the environment. So I'm showing you a time lapse of the beginnings here of the texturing that I'm doing. Think of it like painting, just painting a coat over the land there. So you usually start with a basic texture that spreads the whole entire terrain itself. I did find a shader which I'm using. It's an open source shader, and it pretty much allows me to use multiple different types of textures, different types of patterns and looks on the land itself. It's a pretty complicated thing when you're doing the painting. I ran into some optimization problems, but I ended up getting past it. So I'm doing pretty well here. The type of method I'm trying to use when painting the land, since I'm not like the world's greatest artist, is anytime that there's a type of incline or slope, I'm using a rocky formation. A lot of greenery, things like that, tend to grow on flatter terrain or surfaces. You'll find a lot of rocky formations on the sides or where you find slopes. I guess you can see that like in a typical hiking trail or something like that. Of course, that doesn't mean that you can't get green, grassy slopes itself. It just depends on what you're trying to portray. So that actually turned out pretty well. It's something where I plan on doing a lot of iterations over the texturing itself. So this is the first iteration. It's going to look rough and kind of ugly. It looks really terrible actually from the viewpoint above. But when you're actually immersed in the environment in virtual reality, it looks definitely great. It looks fantastic than when it does from up above. Think of like when you're looking at Google Maps and you're looking at the aerial view, everything just looks kind of crazy. And when you have it down at that first person perspective right in the environment itself. So the terrain is going great. The next steps will be working with the Sky Dome and producing some 360 pictures so that anybody can go in and just look at the testing going on for the actual virtual environment. Besides that, the last thing is that the texturing of the landscape, it needs to have some sort of rough feel to it. So there's too much light being reflected off the environment right now. I'm working on reducing the reflection and getting that rough sort of look, and also making sure that the texturing on the land works well with the agriculture. There's a little bit of pop and not enough blend, so that's all being worked out. Like I said, a couple of iterations that will happen throughout development. I cannot wait to see what I can do to develop and create like a virtual look for the Garden of Eden itself. So I'm going for a really green approach. The landscape itself looks like I decided to kind of make a huge division into the Garden of Eden. There's this huge hill or this slope that divides it from the east and the west. In the book of the Bible, there seemed to be a very distinct description that there's an obvious east side of the Garden of Eden. So I'm figuring there must be an obvious west side. So different parts and sides there of the Garden of Eden. I'm thinking that perhaps on one side, the obvious side there, you'll have perhaps one of the trees, and on the other side, perhaps the other one. I'm not really exactly certain how that's going to break down quite yet. But going forward, we'll see what happens there as I go ahead and digest exactly what is being told and what information is had there of the actual Garden of Eden fact from what can be assumed at that point in time. So that's about it for development this week. Look out for more development videos and updates going forward. Take care.